So, hi, Kitra. It's really nice to talk with you today about your beautiful film. And I've known your family for many years. Your father is a well established, well respected rabbi in Montreal in our community. And I just want you to tell me, I mean, he had a stroke in 2011, and several years later, you decided to make a film about his experience. How did that come about?
Well, we've been collaborators since really the beginning. For actually many years. He's a poet, and when he first had the stroke, he had so much to express within him that immediately I was transcribing his writing and I was photographing him and really trying to share this his experience with the rest of the world, because it was such a particular and um, expressive experience. He really saw himself as being on the far edges of the human experience, and that's why I wanted to capture it. And then when COVID happened, you know, our whole lives turned into disarray because he was living in lockdown. We weren't able to go in and see him. And there was so much chaos happening at that time that I really felt like this was an important moment to capture this chapter of his story, what it was like to live in that kind of isolation, that kind of distance from the rest of society. And so that's what really prompted me to want to make this film.
And how did you make this film? I mean, your father was in a long-term care facility in Montreal. I, you couldn't get in.
Right. So I was actually living in Tucson, Arizona at the time. And like a lot of families have these cameras installed in their loved ones' rooms. The cameras kind of become this extension of the caregiving when you can't be there. At nighttime, we're using the cameras to make sure that our loved ones haven't fallen out of bed. We're making sure that if they're calling out, there's someone there to hear them. That was the case in our family as well. So I decided to use these two cameras that we had installed in his room and direct them and capture his experience, care being experience, as he was living day in and day out with like very little contact with the rest of the world.
And how long did this go on for? How long did you film for?
I was filming every day for about a year. And in addition to this, I was doing these interviews with him on almost a daily basis, always coming back to this question, what is longing? Because longing really felt like the main question of our time. We're all separated, we're all touching each other through these screens, these pixels, and that's our mode of connection. And so the film itself, it's really a meditation on love and on longing, and longing for the past, for the future. So every day I would ask him, what does longing mean to you today? And that was the beginning of our conversation.
And was the rest of your family, I mean, so much of the film, I mean, how many siblings do you have? I'm trying to remember. Four?
Yeah, we're five children. So I'm the eldest of five.
And so much of the film is about your father's connection to your mom and his children. There's some beautiful family archives as well. Was your family involved at all in this creation?
Yeah, everyone got involved in their own ways. I employed my two of my sisters to film my mother because they were with her. So some of the shots are actually done by some of my siblings. But in a way, I felt like making this film was almost a refuge for us in the midst of all of this chaos. He was living in his long-term care facility. There were hundreds of people who got COVID, over 75 people who died from COVID all around him. And so this film was really like our cocoon of love. I felt that I was sort of building this little nest that we could retreat to, looking at all the the family footage and going back and reflecting on childhood. It was this film, yes, it's a story that takes place during COVID, but more than anything, it's a love story. And it's a love story from my father to his wife, my mother, and to all of us, to the children.
But it's also your love story to him, I would
Absolutely.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. And to an honoring of their love.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary film to watch. And your father is so articulate and so philosophical about what he's going through. Can you tell me a bit about your interview process? He's a philosopher. It's amazing.
Yeah. So the entire text of the film itself came together through just interviews. So it's not a script that we wrote out. Um, I'm just asking him questions about his experience, about the caregiving process, about about his emotions around longing and distance, reflecting back on his younger self that could walk and that could move, and his kind of vision of the future.
Yeah,
And from all of those interviews, I pieced together the full text.
yeah, I mean, there's some beautiful quotes like holiness happens when the body feels loved, and the holy way to ask for help, he refers to that as well. So I think his experience as a rabbi really informs his perspective on life and his ability to love life despite having undergone this, trauma of a stroke. I
Yeah.
think audiences can learn a lot from his optimism and sense of the real meaning of living.
Yeah, I wanted it to be a spiritual film without being explicitly so. And so that's really where I think my kind of crafting hand came in, is in really still sticking to the core spirituality of and the faith that one has to have in terms of surviving a situation like that with so many unknowns. But I didn't want it to be explicitly religious or explicitly Jewish. I really wanted it to be a film that could touch people everywhere. And and so many of us, I really feel the experience of people in long-term care, both the workers and the residents and the family members, are really, these are these untold stories that we don't often hear about. We don't hear from the workers and from the residents of long-term care facilities, and yet it's a space that touches so many of our lives. So many people, I think, will resonate with that voice coming from that space. I feel that people that, as I've shared the film, so many people have reached out to me and just said, we feel very seen in this film.
And I understand you've started an organization around these issues. Can you please tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm during the pandemic, I got quite involved in just this issue. How can we as artists tell more stories and bring more light to the experiences of people living in long-term care, people who require care, and the workers themselves. So I started an organization called Artists for Long-Term Care, and we've been collecting stories, documentations from residents, workers, doing a lot of advocacy around just the need for better conditions for our workers and for the residents and their families.
Well, that's wonderful because I think this goes beyond the COVID years, and it's something we need to be concerned about in our society.
Yeah,
And
it's really an issue that goes unseen. And I think, it's by starting Artists for Long-Term Care, it was really a an invitation to other artists to say, let's focus on this important community.
And before we sign off, I just want to ask you, how is your dad today? How does he feel about this film? Has he watched it many times?
Yeah, when I first, he saw a lot of the cuts along the way, but when I finally showed him the finished piece, he said, it's a ballet. It's so on point, which is so typical of him. And yeah, I think he feels seen in the film. And again, like just the use of all of that archival footage from our family growing up, as I was growing up, I think it's just for all of us, whenever it's really a refuge. It's this place for us to like nestle in together and remember and long for that past, and also bring us kind of closer together in the present.
Well, thank you for sharing this beautiful film and your really loving family, and wishing you the very best of success with it. Everyone should watch this. It's a moving, film for our times. Thank you, Kitra.
Thank you so much.